Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got another episode of New to the Nick, which is a series of videos in which I'm just going to talk about the stuff that's recently arrived on my channel. This is going to all be first impressions, right? These are going to be things that I, in many cases have very little idea exactly how the final review is going to go, but people have been asking me for things, or just I want to share my first impressions. That way, people can have some sense of it, even if they want to pull the trigger a little bit sooner, so to speak. So, anyways, let's go ahead and dive into it. One thing that you're going to note, though, is I'm not going to talk about price too much. In most cases, I actually don't know the price at this point, and that's by design, because a part of my review process is figuring out what I think something should be worth, and then eventually figuring out, is it matching that? Because sometimes that clash can be really important, but in other cases, I do know it, and in other cases, it's very important, right? Anyways, let's give some first impressions. This guy right here is the Civivi Imperium, which is actually not a small knife. I thought this was much smaller when it first was announced. This is almost 3.5-inch knife, but it is a front flipper / thumb stud knife, and it works very well. It's a nice liner lock here. It's pretty well done. The design of it is good. Not necessarily in love with this random cutout in the middle of it there. That feels like it kind of breaks the whole thing apart a little bit. But the shred carbon fiber and gold scale material is kind of neat. And, on the whole, the action on it is very, very nice. And the ergonomics on it are pretty good. It's kind of, in a lot of ways, ergonomically Kapara-like the Spyderco Kapara a little bit. But it's an interesting piece. The steel here is Nitro V, which I'm very glad to see Civivi using more. And you know what? Yeah, so far so good. We'll see how it carries. We'll see what my eventual feelings are. But my biggest feeling was, I thought that was about half the size. But no, nonetheless, it's an interesting piece. So there's that. Next up, speaking of interesting, this little guy, the Ki-V, K-I-V from Civivi, is an O-step Hea design, and it is a double detent friction folder sort of thing. Well, maybe not friction folder, double detent flipper. I don't know what the heck the name for these kinds of things is, but basically there's a they're detent balls on both sides there, you can see, and they are locking the blade open and closed. It's got enough lock closed to be a bit flippery and enough lock open to not be completely dangerous, but more importantly, it's got this unsharpened area here so that even if it does start to close on your hand, it's not going to get anywhere. But it's a Wharncliffe style blade. I don't know exactly, it's kind of weird to have a Wharncliffe blade sloping away from you, because that kind of defeats the purpose of this cut for a lot of things, given it's much more awkward when you're on a table and whatnot. But it's an interesting piece, and the action on it is surprisingly good. I can see this being something that could be interesting in a lunchroom setting, because this is going to be very hard to scare somebody. It's sort of like a box cutter thing. Also a good coin pocket, fifth pocket, whatever the heck you want to call it, knife. So I'm curious about it. My first blush is sort of, this is weird and dumb, but that was my first thought of the Spyderco McBee, and it turned out to be weird, dumb, and amazing. And so I kind of think this might end up there, but we're going to see. Next up is this guy. This right here is the Civivi Nox, N-O-X. This is a frame lock from Civivi, but more importantly, it is a steel frame lock. Civivi has never done the steel frame lock game before. And you know what? At some level, hey, it's fine, right? It's a little frame lock, right? It works. And the action on it is good, with one big proviso. If you have any pressure at all on the lock bar, this guy ain't coming open. But if you're good about your hand positioning, it is a very nice little detent. But, that's, of course, the big downside to a frame lock versus a liner lock is, on a liner lock, you can't possibly press your finger against the lock bar, whereas on this guy, that's kind of the default. But anyways, interesting knife. It has a Nitro V blade. You can see it comes down to a nice thin edge. The size on it's good. The ergos are pretty good. This finger choil could be a little bit wider. Length is just under 3 inches. Interesting. Not quite sure how I feel about it. Part of that's going to depend on the price. Sorry, some douchebag on a really loud bike just drove by. Anyways, I digress. We have but it's an interesting price. It's an interesting piece. We'll see about the price. The price had better be relatively inexpensive for stainless steel frame lock to make sense. Next up is this guy. This is the Kansept Knives Reverie. This is a design by Justin Lundqvist, who's the guy who did the Wee Black Void Opus, Kaiser Feist. He's done a bunch of cool stuff. I'm generally here for his design work. And this is another one that's very much him, right? This pattern, hey, Justin Lundqvist. But it's an interesting piece in that it is a bolster lock style thing, but it is a top flipper sort of thing. You can see this has jimping along the top of it here, and the way to open it is either you can use your thumb to do it that way, or you can use your index finger and pull around from the top. Neat. The action on it is quite nice, and I haven't disassembled it even yet, so, that's something. The overall, size, shape, ergos are good to go. I'm curious how this is going to carry on a regular basis, but it's kind of a nice approach to flipping. Gives you some options, and, yeah, that's neat. Next up is this guy. I don't think I had this on the last one, but if I did, I deeply apologize. Let's see if my first impressions have stayed the same. This is the Cricket LCK, or LCK Plus, I'm sorry, CRKT. The biggest difference here is this is assisted versus the last one is not. CRKT has decided that it's time to get into the assisted market in 2021, which is an interesting choice. I get that for a lot of people that is an important, factor there, and their assist is actually, it's a better assist, I think, than many, in that it's a little bit smoother, it's a little easier to close and whatnot. But I don't know. Going from an unassisted action to an assisted one in the LCK, the original LCK was really great. It's now discontinued, but I don't know how I feel about this. But at the very least, it's an interesting knife. Would like to see thinner stock as well, is the other big thing. I don't know why they had to go quite this hardcore on stock with thickness, but anyways, I'm definitely going to try this and get a sense of whether their assist is going to be, meaningfully better, worse, different, whatever. Next up, this guy. This right here, my friends, is the James Brand Barnes. So James Brand is a brand that's not shown up that often on my channel before. I looked at some of their very early stuff, which was a little bit more hip than it was well made. This is James Brand turning around and saying, no, we can make really good knives too. And this is a really good knife. This is actually made in collaboration with Rayot, and it is a full integral pocket knife here with a very interesting disassembly mechanism. The disassembly on this guy was unique, even relative to other integrals. They've done the nice things like putting the area under the pocket clip here. It's a good clip. It's good texturing. The smooth area under the pocket clip, to be clear about that. The blade on it is very nice, coming down to a very nice thin edge. I am actually very impressed with this knife. It's M390, by the way. You can see up there. I am very impressed with this knife. It is a very, very good knife in a bunch of ways, and ergonomically, it just melts into the hand. This is really well done in every way but one, and that one is the price point. This is one of those exceptions. Price point on this guy is $600, and yeah, that's a lot. That is a lot relative to a lot of what's out there in the world. And so that's kind of that's the elephant in the room for this guy. This is a great design, unquestionably. And at any other price point, this could be a very easy contender when we're thinking knives of the year. But I'm afraid that the price kind of, that's going to be a thing that I grapple with. We'll just put it that way in the final review. That is a very optimistic price point, and although it's really well done, I think I'm not going to say they've earned it, but they've done their best here very clearly. But yeah, that's definitely a downside. This guy right here is the Venom. This is from HEA Designs. HEA Designs is a company that I've featured a bunch of times on the channel. Most recently, come here, Falcon. This guy, which has, by the way, been modded in preparation for a charitable giveaway by EDC Gearhouse / Way Knife. But this is a slip joint kind of style thing that they did. But this guy is the Venom from HEA Designs, and it's sort of a follow-up to a knife they did way back when that was in a similar vein. It is a really weird knife, right? The blade shape is unusual. The handle shape is unusual. The whole damn thing is unusual, right? But that's kind of HEA's whole shtick. It is pocket pecking like crazy. That is the biggest downside to this guy. This guy's going to be pecking on whatever's in your pocket all damn day long. But other than that, honestly, it's pretty cool. Interesting knife. They've done a lot of really good stuff here. The action on it is quite nice. And just very smooth, very nice. Overall, it's well made. It's well designed. The question is just whether this design is going to appeal to you. And I think it's going to be very polarizing, as a lot of his stuff is. But, at the same time, it's better to do something that's completely weird and unusual and, rather than, I don't know, something that's more and more of the same. Honestly, this kind of opening mechanism with this kind of knife, oh, that could be pretty compelling. But anyways, I digress. The HEA is there. Speaking of designers with a very strong language, this is the Damn Designs Fenrir. Right? This is an interesting piece in that it is very inexpensive. It's D2 steel, and The price is well under the $60 point. I want to say 40, but I may be lying to myself here. This is not a particularly expensive knife, and in that light, it's actually interesting, right? It's a G10 sort of handle here. It's a liner lock. At some level, does the world need another overseas-made, D2 liner lock? Probably not, but at the same time, this one's interesting. You got a nice, strong Wharncliffe blade on it here. Very parallelogram-ish in design. This lock bar is a little bit proud, and the clip is a little bit of a miss, I think, ergonomically speaking, but otherwise, you know what? It's interesting, and it's a little bit different, right? It's a little bit different design DNA than a lot of what's going on out there in the budget world. Then finally, there's this guy. This is sort of the exception on the table because I have actually reviewed this before. This is the SharpByDesign Micro Evo. This is a new one that I actually ordered. Last time they opened up, I was thinking, maybe I should try that with some Damasteel, and I did. And you can see here, this is a Damasteel blade. I also happened to order one of the Knife Nuts podcast editions because I'm a weak man. I'll probably end up selling whichever one I end up liking less, but this remains a really nice knife, and yeah, this is good, and especially with that little bit of extra fancy off the Damasteel, I like it a lot. So this is newly arrived, but don't expect a review of it. It's just going to end up in my collection, maybe this or the Knife Nuts podcast one. So, yeah, that's the thing. I don't think there's anything else interesting that has recently arrived on the table. I got some, I'm continuing to film, continuing to work through it, but yeah, there you go. So, hope this has been interesting to you, and keep an eye out for full reviews of the rest of this gear in the future, but hopefully this will hold you over till then. Have an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.